Ladies and gentlemen, I give you our friend Michael Shrimpton.
I don't ever, of course, set out to cause dissension, ladies and gentlemen. It's just that you do so very well to bring me out of my shell. We barristers are a bit like badgers, as you know. We're shy, retiring creatures that tend only to come out at night. And it's very kind of Harry to let me out in the day to address you all. I apologise, by the way, for being a little bit late. It's not that I slept in. I was up to 6:30, knocking off another set of pleadings. All the solicitors who never sent me work for the years, you tell them I'm taking a sabbatical for a year, and they suddenly said, "Oh, good Lord, we don't want you to go. We want you to do this and that and the other." So I was suing London Underground this morning, and I needed to get the pleadings off to the solicitor before I went away. Now, I should hasten to add that I'm not emigrating to Australia. I've done that already, age 6. The Australian connection, for those who don't know me, my father was in the RAF. Sorry, Bill, it should have been the Navy, but should have been the Fleet Air Arm, really. But he flew sabres in the RAF post-war, and he retired from the RAF. He was a victim of that nasty German spy, Duncan Sands. Yes, 57 white paper, the one that said that aeroplanes don't need pilots. Yes, we still have aeroplanes. Most aeroplanes still have pilots, Harry. But in 1957, there's a nasty little German spy called Duncan Sands who had to go at the RAF, and there wasn't much future in being a pilot, sadly, in the early 60s. And Dad
killed our aircraft industry as well, I believe.
Yes, Sands, interesting. He came up with a cunning plan to dismantle the British military aircraft industry called the TSR-2. And he was in league with another German spy called Roy Jenkins, something you may have heard of, he was a Labour politician, not very good. Roy Jenkins, that's right. Who, aside from being a great consumer of claret, was also a German spy. And Jenkins and Sands were in cahoots on the TSR-2. The idea of the TSR-2, as you probably know, was to funnel all military aircraft development into one project. Now, somebody should have spotted that all their eggs were going into one basket. A number of very promising aircraft, Thin Wind Hunter, the Javelin developments, the Salisbury rocket fighter, and a whole range of interesting projects were cancelled as a result of the white paper. And then Whitehall said, "Oh, don't matter, because we're going to have the TSR-2. And of course the intention all along was to cancel the TSR-2. There's never any intention at all of having a TSR-2 in the service. The whole thing was a fraud and a con from beginning to end. The Whitehall incidentally pulled the same trick on the Americans. There was Roy Jenkins told the Americans when the TSR-2 was cancelled that we were going to buy the F-111, which was that very big heavy swing wing thing that was originally going to be a naval fighter. You can believe it, Bill. God bless the American Navy. I love the American Navy. They don't think small. But the F-111 was originally a naval fighter. The idea was going to fly off aircraft carriers. It was almost as big as the aircraft carrier, but that didn't stop the Navy thinking in those terms. And we told the Americans we were going to buy the F-111. All Roy Jenkins wanted was the details, was the intellectual property, the F-111, which was then handed over to his German paymasters and then went over to the Russians. And some of it ended up in some of the Russian swing wing stuff. The F-111 order was also a complete phony. There was never any intention to order F-111s for the RAF, never any intention whatsoever to have the TSR-2 deployed. Anyway, you diverted me, but you raised a very good point. No, I like responding to the audience. I'm a dynamic speaker, you see, isn't that right, Aaron?
Absolutely.
Engage with the audience.
I thought it was Healy that got rid of the TSR-2.
Well, Healy took the blame. Jenkins was the key player. Jenkins was Minister of Aviation, and Healy was his boss. But the problem was, although officially Dennis Healy was the boss, Dennis Healy wasn't a German spy. I know it sounds odd to say that because he was a member of Parliament, he was in the Labour Party, and he was in Chancellor of the Exchequer, but he wasn't actually a German spy.
Exception proves the rule.
Exception proves the rule. One of the few. I've met Dennis Healy. He's actually quite a nice chap. He was the beach master at Anzio. So far as we know, he wasn't he who told the Germans all about Anzio. I mean, it didn't take the Germans very long to cotton on to the fact that we'd landed at Anzio. So far as we know, no military secrets went from Dennis Healy to the Hun, our community partner, the Hun, in 1944 when he was down at Anzio doing good work. We'll also have to be a little bit careful with a lot of our politicians, both British and American, are of course war heroes from World War II, but working in the field of counterintelligence, one has to work out which side they're a war hero for. Wasn't always our side. One American vice president, I'd better be careful, I won't name names. There's one American politician, rather successful post-war, who was a war hero for the Japanese. He claimed to have flown his aeroplane. I better not say which aeroplane it was because that will identify him. Anyway, he claimed to have flown his he claimed to have been shot down by the Japanese. And he said his crew, he had a crew of 3, and the crew, he said, stayed with the aeroplane. Only he was able to bail out, and the rest of the crew sadly went down with the plane. Well, right, that was accepted for many people for many years, until I had a quiet word of Japanese intelligence and confirmed that, in fact, when he said that his plane had been shot down by the Japanese, that was a terminological inexactitude, as Winston might have said. And Harry, our chairman, is one of those who has had the honour of meeting Winston Churchill. How many times did you meet Winnie?
Oh, I'm afraid it was only one.
Only the once. Well, that's fine. That's more than I am. Very impressive. That was a terminological inexactitude. When he said that the plane was shot down, what he meant to say was that he'd landed the plane at a Japanese-held island, and his crew had been beheaded by the Japanese in order to stop them talking, and then he had flown off in a Japanese float plane and landed on the ocean at a prearranged spot for an American submarine to rescue him that was in the command of a German spy working in the American Navy. And that had all been set up by a German spy called Admiral Ernest King, who was in charge of the US Navy. One of the reasons why we lost so many tankers off the coast of Texas in 1942, because King was making sure that there were no proper convoy arrangements, and the Jerrys were told, sorry, our community partners, the Jerrys, were told when the tankers were sailing. The U-boats that sank the tankers were, of course, based in Mexican waters, courtesy of the Mexican government, which was run by a German stooge. Belonged to a party called the Institutional Revolutionary Party, which was an organ of German intelligence, a little bit like the Conservative Party. Sorry, a bit like the SDP, or the Lib Dems. Did you know the Liberal Party was set up by the Germans? The modern Liberal Party was set up by German intelligence. It was set up by the Prussians, in fact, by the idea for having the Liberal Party belonged to a chap called Wilhelm Steiber, who was the head of Prussian intelligence back in. The Prussians had recruited a chap called Gladstone, and the modern Liberal Party was founded in 1859 and was really a vehicle for German intelligence. The Whigs reported to the French and the Spanish. The Liberals reported to the Germans. That's the big difference. People ask you, what's the difference between a Liberal and a Whig? A Whig reports to the French, whereas a Liberal reports to the Germans.
Was Germany in existence in 1859?
No, Prussia was. Steiber was the head of Prussian intelligence and was one of the driving forces for the unification of Germany. Modern German Empire comes in, of course, in 1871. But Prussia is the driving force, and Prussian intelligence controls German intelligence right from the word go. So Steiber is the Prussian intelligence chief. He then works for a chap called Bismarck, and he is Bismarck's brains. He was the brains behind Bismarck. And effectively advised on the unification of Germany. But the unification of Germany was something that was planned from at least 1848, and the idea of controlling the Liberal Party, or the left wing of British politics, was being run around about the same time. Steiber also ran a German spy called Marx, who wrote a daft book called the Communist Manifesto. We know Marx couldn't be a Marxist because he was intelligent. As you know, Harry, you can either be a Marxist or you can be intelligent, but you can't be both. So if anybody claims to be a Marxist who is bright, then we know he's lying. And so the next question is, who is he working for? It can't be us. A bit like Miliband. There was a Marxist called Miliband who claimed to be a Jewish refugee from Germany, which is code for I was a German spy, and was smuggled in under a false identity. Miliband it has actually not a real name. It was a apparently invented name, a nom de plume that someone in Prussia.
He's also a Pole and not a German.
Yes, absolutely fascinating background. But he was Polish. That's right. But he was a German spy, and his grandfather.